The great chamber of the Galactic Concord was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings. It floated in neutral space, far from any star system, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold 10,000 representatives from across the known universe. Today, it held only 500, but the fear in the room made it feel much smaller. Director Lena Vasquez sat at the far end of the chamber, in the section reserved for what the older races called observer species. Humanity had only been part of galactic society for 80 years. In cosmic terms, they were babies. The 5 great powers had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. She watched the representatives argue. The Valkyrie delegation stood at the center podium. They were tall beings, nearly 3 meters high, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Their lead speaker, Ambassador Tethran, was practically shouting now. "The Void Wyams have consumed 3 star systems in the last rotation," he said. 17 billion souls, gone, not dead, gone, erased from existence as if they never lived at all. The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of translation devices. Every species present understood the weight of those words. "We sent our greatest fleet to stop them," Tethran continued. 400 warships. The most advanced weapons our civilization has ever created. He paused, and Vasquez could see his 4 hands shaking slightly. They lasted 9 seconds. 9 seconds, and then there was nothing left. Not debris. Not bodies. Nothing. A representative from the Crystalline Syndicate rose to speak. These beings were made of living crystal, their bodies shifting and reforming as they moved. Light passed through them in strange ways, creating rainbows on the walls behind them. "Our calculations show the Void Wyams are moving toward the galactic core," the crystal being said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "At their current speed, they will reach the first core systems in 18 standard rotations. Our models predict total galactic extinction within 50 rotations." Vasquez did the math in her head. 50 rotations was about 41 Earth years. 41 years until everything ended. The Earth Collective spoke next. They were a hive mind species, thousands of small insect-like creatures that shared one consciousness. When they spoke, hundreds of tiny voices said the same words at slightly different times, creating an eerie echo effect. "We have analyzed all available data," the Earth said. "We find no solution. The Void Wyams exist partially outside our dimension. Our weapons cannot touch them. Our shields cannot stop them. They do not eat or sleep or rest. They simply consume. We calculate the probability of survival at 0.03%. The Dramathi Empire's representative slammed his fist on his podium. The Dramathi were reptilian beings, covered in thick scales of red and gold. They were known throughout the galaxy as warriors, proud and fierce. "Then we fight anyway," he growled. "We gather every ship from every species. We throw everything we have at these monsters. Maybe we die, but we die with honor. Honor will not save 17 billion more souls," the Luminari Federation delegate said softly. The Luminari were beings of pure energy, contained in special suits that gave them humanoid form. They glowed with soft golden light. "We must think, not simply react." And so the argument continued. For 3 hours, Vasquez watched the most powerful beings in the galaxy argue, blame each other, and accomplish nothing. The Valkyrie wanted to sacrifice the Outer Rim colonies, hoping the Wyams would be satisfied and stop. The Dramathi wanted war, regardless of the odds. The Earth kept repeating their calculations, as if saying the numbers enough times would change them. The Luminari suggested research that would take decades they did not have. The Crystalline Syndicate remained silent, their internal light dimming with what Vasquez recognized as despair. Finally, during a pause in the shouting, Vasquez stood up. Several nearby delegates looked at her with surprise. Observer species were not supposed to speak at emergency sessions. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. The translation devices carried it across the chamber. "I have a question." Ambassador Tethran turned his 4 eyes toward her. "The chair recognizes the human observer," he said, his tone making it clear he was being polite only because protocol demanded it. "Though I remind the chamber that observer species do not have speaking rights in emergency sessions." "I understand," Vasquez said. "I just want to ask one thing and then I'll sit down. Has anyone actually tried talking to them?" The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, it transformed into laughter. The Dramathi representative's laugh was a harsh bark. The Valkyrie made a sound like rushing water that was their version of amusement. Even the Orth buzzed in a way that suggested they found the question ridiculous. "Talk to them?" The Dramathi said when he could speak again. "Human, these are not beings that talk. They are not beings at all. They are a force of destruction, like a black hole or a supernova. You do not negotiate with the end of everything." "Have you tried?" Vasquez asked again. "There is nothing to try," Ambassador Tethran said, his voice now carrying the patient tone adults used with children who asked foolish questions. "The void worms have no language. They have no communication systems. They do not respond to any signal we send. They simply consume. Your species is young, Director Vasquez. You will learn that not every problem has a diplomatic solution. Some threats can only be fought or fled from." Vasquez nodded slowly. She looked around the chamber at the 5 great powers of the galaxy. For thousands of years, these species had ruled the stars. They had technology that seemed like magic. They had wisdom accumulated over countless generations. And they had already decided that nothing could be done. "So your plan," she said, "is to argue about who to sacrifice, fight a battle you know you cannot win, or simply wait to die." "You oversimplify," the Luminari delegate said. "We are exploring all options." "No," Vasquez interrupted. "You're not. You've already decided this is impossible. I can see it in how you talk, how you argue. None of you actually believe you can win. You're just going through the motions." Ambassador Tethran's forearms crossed in what Vasquez recognized as a gesture of offense. "And what would humanity do differently? Your species has barely mastered faster than light travel. You have no weapons that could scratch a void worm. Your population is tiny compared to ours. What could you possibly offer?" Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Earth. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a war that killed 60 million people and still kept a garden full of flowers. She thought about the stories of her ancestors, who crossed oceans in wooden boats, who walked across frozen continents, who kept going when any sensible creature would have given up. She thought about what made humans different from every other species in this room. "We don't know how to quit," she finally said. More laughter. Softer this time, more pitying. "Bravery is admirable," Ambassador Tethran said. "But it is not a strategy." Vasquez gathered her documents. She looked once more around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate she could. Some looked away. Others stared back with amusement or condescension. A few, she noticed, watched her with something that might have been curiosity. "Fine," she said. The word was quiet, but the translation devices carried it perfectly. "We'll handle it." She walked toward the exit. Behind her, the laughter started again, but it died quickly. Something in her voice and the way she moved had changed the air in the room. "Director Vasquez," Ambassador Tethran called out. "What exactly do you mean by that?" She stopped at the door and turned back. "I mean exactly what I said. You've all decided this is impossible. You've given up. So fine. Humanity will handle it, We'll find a way to stop the void worms, or we'll die trying. But we will not sit here and wait for the end. You cannot be serious, the Crystalline Syndicate delegate said. Your species does not have the resources, the technology, the knowledge. Then we'll figure it out, Vasquez said simply. That's what we do. She left the chamber. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ambassador Tethran activated his personal communicator. Get me the intelligence ministry, he said quietly. I want full surveillance on every human vessel, station, and colony, immediately. Across the chamber, similar orders were being given. The Dramathi Military Command received priority alerts. The Crystalline Syndicate's prediction networks began running new scenarios. The Orth Collective started analyzing every piece of data they had ever collected on humanity. The Luminary Federation quietly activated observation posts that had been dormant for decades. Within 1 hour of Vasquez leaving the chamber, every major galactic intelligence agency had changed their threat assessment of humanity. The previous rating had been curious newcomers, low priority. The new rating varied slightly by species, but they all carried the same essential message: maximum alert. Monitor closely. Do not underestimate. The elder races had seen many things in their long histories. They had survived wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters. They thought they understood the universe and everything in it, but they did not understand humans. Not yet, and that, they were beginning to realize, might be the most dangerous thing of all. In the human embassy on the station, Director Vasquez was already making calls. To Earth, to Mars, to the colonies on Europa and Titan and the stations scattered across a dozen star systems. The same message went out to all of them. This is Director Vasquez. Authorization code Prometheus 7. We have work to do. All hands, all resources, all ideas. We have 41 years to save the galaxy. She paused, and despite everything, a small smile crossed her face. Let's show them what humans can do. The message ended. Across human space, lights that had been dim began to glow. Factories that had been idle started up. Scientists who had been working on theoretical problems suddenly had very practical questions to answer. The humans were getting to work, and the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, would never be the same. 48 hours after Director Vasquez walked out of the Galactic Concord, humanity went silent. Ambassador Tethran stood in his private office on the Volcari homeworld, staring at reports that made no sense. Every human embassy in the galaxy had closed its doors. Every human ship had changed course and headed back to their home systems. Trade agreements were suspended. Communication channels went dark. The borders of human space, once open and welcoming, were now sealed tight. What are they doing? He asked his intelligence chief, a younger Valkyrie named Sorrel, who had spent 30 years studying alien species. We do not know, Ambassador, Sorrel admitted. Our listening posts are picking up nothing. It's as if they've simply stopped talking to the universe. That's impossible. No species can go completely silent. There's always chatter, always signals. Humans can, apparently. Sorrel pulled up a map of human space on the display screen. We've confirmed that all their colonies are still active. Power signatures are actually increasing across their systems. They're not dead or hiding. They're just not talking to anyone outside their borders. Tethran felt a chill run through his body. In 3,000 years of galactic politics, he had never seen anything like this. When species faced crisis, they reached out to allies. They sought help. They traded and bargained and begged. They did not lock themselves away and go quiet. What about our agents inside human space? He asked. Sorrel's expression darkened. That's the strange part, Ambassador. They're still there. They're still sending reports. But the reports are concerning. Show me. The intelligence chief brought up a series of messages. They were fragments, broken pieces of information gathered from spies, who were clearly operating under difficult conditions. The first report read, "Massive industrial output. Every factory running at maximum capacity. Cannot determine what they are building." The second, "Research facilities locked down. Scientists working around the clock. Guards everywhere. No one is talking about what they're researching." The third made Tethran's blood run cold. Something is being built in the outer system. It's big. Bigger than anything I've ever seen. When I asked about it, everyone just smiled and said, "Prometheus." They wouldn't explain what that means. "Prometheus," Tethran repeated. "What is that? A weapon? A ship? A code name?" "We've searched all human cultural databases," Sorrel said. Prometheus was a figure in their ancient mythology, a being who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans. He was punished for it, tortured for eternity, but he never regretted his choice. The humans considered him a hero, so they named their secret project after a figure who did the impossible and accepted terrible consequences for it. Tethran sat down heavily. That tells us nothing good. On the other side of the galaxy, the Dramathi Empire was having similar concerns. Grand Admiral Cross stood before a wall of screens, each showing different surveillance feeds from human space. "They've increased mining operations in their asteroid belt by 300%, one of his officers reported. "They're pulling in raw materials at a rate that should be impossible for their population. What are they building?" Cross demanded. "We don't know, Grand Admiral. But whatever it is, it's consuming resources that should last them centuries. They're burning through their reserves like there's no tomorrow." Cross was a warrior. He had fought in 17 major conflicts. He understood the signs of war preparation better than almost anyone alive. What he was seeing from human space looked like preparation, but not for any war he recognized. "They're not building a fleet," he said slowly, realization dawning. "A fleet would require standardized construction, shipyards working in parallel. Instead, they're funneling everything to a single location." "The Outer System Project," the officer confirmed. "This Prometheus thing." "One ship," Cross said. "They're building one ship, and they're putting everything they have into it." He turned to face his staff. "What kind of ship requires the resources of an entire civilization?" No one had an answer. The Crystalline Syndicate had the most advanced prediction technology in the galaxy. Their networks could model the future with remarkable accuracy, calculating probabilities and outcomes that other species couldn't even imagine. When they turned these systems toward humanity, the results were disturbing. "The models are failing," the lead analyst reported to the Syndicate Council. Light refracted through her crystal body in patterns that showed her distress. "We cannot predict what humans will do." "Explain," the Council demanded. "Our models work by understanding a species' fundamental nature. We know how Velkari think, how Dramathi react, how Orth calculate. We can predict their actions because we understand what drives them." The analyst's light flickered. "Humans do not follow any pattern we recognize. They make decisions that seem irrational by every metric we have." "Give us an example." "Their Prometheus project. Our models say they should be building defenses. Every other species, when faced with extinction, invests in survival infrastructure, bunkers, evacuation ships, hidden colonies. Instead, humans are building a single vessel designed to travel toward the Void Worm's point of origin." The analyst paused. "They're not trying to survive. They're trying to solve the problem." "That is the irrational part?" "The point of origin is a dimensional breach. Nothing that enters it returns. Every probe, every scan, every test has shown the same thing. It is a one-way door to oblivion. And humans are building a ship to fly through it on purpose." The Council was silent for a long moment. Finally, The eldest member spoke. Perhaps they do not understand the danger. They understand completely, the analyst said. Their own scientists has confirmed the breach is unsurvivable. They published the data themselves. They know exactly what they're planning to do. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. They're going anyway. The Orth Collective processed information differently than individual species. Their hive mind could analyze millions of data points simultaneously, finding patterns that single consciousnesses would miss. When they turned their attention to humanity, they found something unexpected. Humans are not like us, the collective reported to the Galactic Concord in a special session. We calculate. We optimize. We find the most efficient path to survival. Humans do not do this. Then, what do? Ambassador Tethran asked. They endure. The many voices of the Orth spoke in eerie harmony. We have studied their history. Their species survived extinction events that should have destroyed them. Ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, diseases that killed half their population. Each time, logic said they should have perished. Each time, they refused. Stubbornness is not a strategy, the Dramathi representative said. You misunderstand. It is not stubbornness. It is something we have no word for in our language. The closest translation is spite. The Orth paused. When humans are told something is impossible, they do not accept this. They become angry at the impossibility itself. They fight against reality as if it were an enemy that could be defeated. That is insane, the Luminari delegate said. Yes, the Orth agreed. It is completely irrational. And yet they are still here. Their species survived when mathematics said they should not. We calculate the probability of this at less than 1%. Somehow, they found that 1% and held on to it with their bare hands. The emergency session continued, but no conclusions were reached. The great powers of the galaxy watched and waited, unable to understand what humanity was doing and unable to stop them. Meanwhile, in the outer reaches of human space, the Prometheus project continued. Workers in pressure suits labored around the clock, guided by engineers who had not slept in days. Scientists ran simulations and experiments, testing theories that had been considered impossible just months before. And slowly, piece by piece, a ship took shape. It was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Not a warship, though it had weapons. Not an exploration vessel, though it had sensors. It was something new, built for a single purpose, to go where nothing should go and survive what nothing should survive. Captain Marcus. Chun stood on an observation deck, watching his future command come together. He was a tall man, quiet, with gray just starting to touch his black hair. He had volunteered for this mission, knowing exactly what it meant. So had everyone else. 3,000 crew, his first officer said, joining him at the window. Every one of them volunteers. We had to turn away 10 times that number. I know, Chun said. Do you think we can do it? Actually survive the breach? Chun was quiet for a long moment. Below them, welders created brilliant stars of light as they worked. Somewhere in the distance, a cargo ship was delivering more materials for the construction. I think we have to try, he finally said. Everyone else has given up. The Velkari, the Dramathi, all of them. They've done the math and decided it's impossible. They're just waiting to die. Maybe they're right. Maybe it is impossible. Maybe. Chun turned to face his officer. But humans have never been very good at accepting maybe. If there's even a chance, we take it. That's who we are. That's what we do. The first officer nodded slowly. Then I suppose we better not fail. No, Chun agreed, looking back at the ship that would carry them into the unknown. We'd better not. Across the galaxy, intelligence agencies continued to monitor human space. They watched the project grow. They tried to predict what would happen. They calculated odds and probabilities and risk assessments. None of them truly understood what they were seeing. They saw a species preparing for what looked like suicide. What they did not see was hope. Stubborn, irrational, human hope. The kind that looked at impossible odds and said, "Fine, I'll handle it," and meant every word. The void worms continued their advance. 2 more systems fell, their populations erased from existence. The clock was ticking, and humanity kept building, because that was what humans did. When everything seemed lost, when every other option had failed, when the math said survival was impossible, humans got to work. They built. They planned. They refused to accept that the story was over. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. They were about to learn what it meant. The HSS Defiance was finished in 6 months. By any reasonable standard, this was impossible. Ships of this size and complexity should have taken decades to design and build. The Valkyrie had spent 40 years constructing their flagship. The Dramathi's largest warship had been a generation-long project. Humans had done it in half a year. Captain Marcus. Chun walked through the corridors of his ship for the first time since construction ended. Everything smelled new. The walls were smooth and clean. The lights hummed with quiet energy. It felt alive, this ship, ready for whatever came next. The alien observers are going crazy, his communications officer reported, falling into step beside him. They've been trying to scan us since we launched. They can't figure out how we built this so fast. Let them wonder, Chun said. It's not magic. We just work differently. And they had. Chem had watched the whole process unfold. Human engineers didn't follow the careful, methodical approach that other species used. They didn't wait until every design was perfect before starting construction. Instead, they built and fixed at the same time. They made mistakes and learned from them instantly. They worked in parallel, with thousands of teams solving different problems simultaneously and sharing solutions in real time. Most importantly, they didn't waste time on fear. When alien engineers faced an unsolved problem, they stopped and studied it. They held meetings. They formed committees. They calculated risks. Human engineers looked at unsolved problems and said, "We'll figure it out as we go." Sometimes they were wrong. Sometimes things broke. But they were always moving forward. The result was the Defiance. A ship built from impossible deadlines and stubborn determination. A ship that shouldn't exist but did. Chun entered the main briefing room, where his senior officers were already waiting. Commander Sarah Kim, his first officer, had been a physicist before she joined the service. Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka had designed half the ship's systems herself. Dr. James Okonkwo was their xenobiologist, an expert on alien life forms. Lieutenant Maria Santos ran security. They were the best humanity had to offer. "Status report," Chun said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "All systems operational," Tanaka reported. "The dimensional shielding is holding at full strength. We've tested it against every energy type we could find. It should protect us during the breach crossing." She paused. "Should. The crew is ready," Santos added. 3,000 volunteers, all fully trained. Morale is surprisingly high, considering we're flying into a hole in reality that nothing has ever returned from. Kim finished dryly. "Yes, morale is excellent." Chun almost smiled. This was the human way. Make jokes about death. Laugh in the face of impossible odds. It wasn't bravery, exactly. It was something deeper than that. Something built into human nature over millions of years of evolution. "Dr. Okonkwo," Chun said, "tell us what we know about the void worms." The xenobiologist activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air. Massive creatures of shadow and light. shapes that hurt the eye to look at, bodies that seem to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The void worms are not native to our universe, Okonkwo began. They come from somewhere else, somewhere beyond normal space-time. They entered our dimension through a breach that opened approximately 12,000 years ago. At that time, the breach was small, and only a few worms came through. They were observed by ancient civilizations. Then they went dormant. Why did they wake up now? Kim asked. We're not certain, but we have a theory. The breach has been growing slowly over the millennia. It recently reached a critical size. When it did, more worms began emerging. The new arrivals seemed to have awakened the dormant ones. The images changed, showing the devastated systems where the worms had fed. Empty space where planets should have been. Stars dimmed and dying. Nothing left. They don't just kill, Okonkwo continued. They consume matter, energy, even information. When they eat a world, that world ceases to exist in every meaningful way. No debris, no radiation signature, nothing. It's as if the universe forgets it was ever there. And we're flying toward where they come from, Tanaka said quietly. Yes, Okonkwo nodded. The breach is located in a region of space, the Valkyrie call the Void. It's approximately 3 weeks away at maximum speed. No probe has ever survived approaching within 1 light year of it. But we will, Chun said. It was not a question. That's the plan, Captain. Chun stood and walked to the main viewport. Outside, the stars stretched in infinite patterns. Somewhere out there, creatures from another dimension were eating their way through the galaxy. Every other species had given up. Every calculation said there was no hope, but humans had never been very good at listening to calculations. I want to tell you all something, Chun said, not turning around. I've read your files. I know why each of you is here. Dr. Okonkwo, you lost family on Nexus Prime when the worms took it. Commander Kim, your research colony was in the projected path. Chief Tanaka, Lieutenant Santos, all of you have reasons to want this mission to succeed. He turned to face them. But I need you to understand something. We're not doing this for revenge. We're not doing this because we have to. We're doing this because we can try. Because someone has to. Because that's what humans do. With respect, Captain, Kim said, what makes you think we can succeed when every other species has failed? Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he told them a story. 100,000 years ago, humans were not the dominant species on Earth. We were prey. Small, weak, with no claws or fangs or armor. Every night, we huddled in caves while predators hunted us. Every day, we fought just to survive. He moved to a display and brought up images from human history. Cave paintings, ancient tools, the long journey of human evolution. But we had something other animals didn't: persistence. We couldn't outrun predators, so we outlasted them. We chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We endured heat and cold and hunger that would kill other creatures. We survived ice ages by refusing to die. We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We climbed mountains because they were there. The images changed. Humans building, exploring, fighting, surviving. Diseases that killed millions. Wars that burned continents. Disasters that should have ended them. And through it all, humans kept going. Every other species in the galaxy evolved to know when to quit, Chun said. When the odds are too bad, they stop. They conserve resources. They accept defeat. It's the smart thing to do. It's the logical thing. He paused. Humans never developed that instinct. We literally don't know how to give up. When something is impossible, we don't see a wall. We see a challenge. He looked at each of his officers in turn. That's why we might succeed. Not because we're smarter than the Valkyrie or stronger than the Dramathi. but because we're going to keep trying, even when every reasonable being would stop. We're going to push forward when all logic says to retreat. And sometimes that's enough. And if it's not enough, Santos asked quietly, then we die trying. But we don't die standing still. We don't die waiting. We die moving forward, which is the only way humans know how to go. The bridge crew was silent. Then, slowly, Tanaka smiled. You know, she said, when you put it that way, it almost sounds reasonable. It sounds insane, Kim corrected, but insane in a very human way. Chun nodded. Prepare for departure. We leave in 6 hours. As his officers left to make final preparations, Chun remained at the viewport. He thought about Earth, about his family, about all the billions of humans who were counting on them. They had put everything they had into this ship. Every resource, every scientist, every hopeful prayer. Now it was up to him and his crew. The Defiance left human space at exactly midnight, Earth time. It accelerated to maximum speed, heading toward the darkness between stars. Behind them, thousands of lights flickered. Human stations and colonies, watching their only hope disappear into the void. On observation decks throughout the galaxy, members of other species watched too. The Valkyrie ambassador stood in his office, tracking the ship's course on a display screen. The Dramathi Grand Admiral watched from his flagship, surrounded by silent officers. The Crystalline Syndicate's prediction networks hummed with activity. Still unable to calculate what would happen next, they all saw the same thing. One ship, carrying 3,000 humans, flying towards certain death. But they didn't see what was happening inside that ship. They didn't see the engineers running final checks, the scientists reviewing data, the crew members writing letters home that might never be delivered. They didn't see the determination on their faces or the steady beat of their hearts. They didn't understand that for humans, impossible was just a word that meant try harder. The Defiance flew on, growing smaller against the stars until it was gone from sight, but not from hope, never from hope. The breach was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. It hung in space like a wound in reality itself, edges glowing with colors that didn't exist in normal physics. Through it, strange lights flickered and pulsed, hints of another universe entirely. Captain Chun stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the breach grow larger on the main view screen. They had been traveling for 3 weeks, and now they were closer than any ship had ever come. The sensors were going crazy, detecting energy readings that shouldn't be possible. Dimensional shielding holding at 92%. Chief Engineer Tanaka reported from her station. We're taking some drift, but within acceptable parameters. Life signs from the breach? Chun asked. Dr. Okonkwo checked his instruments. Detecting movement. Lots of it. The Wyarms are aware of us. As if in response, shapes began emerging from the breach. Void Wyarms, dozens of them, their massive bodies blocking out stars as they moved. They were even more terrifying up close than the reports had suggested. Each one was kilometers long, made of shadow and impossible angles. They looked like something from a nightmare, creatures that shouldn't exist in any sane universe. They're not attacking, Commander Kim observed. They're watching us. She was right. The Wyarms circled the Defiance like sharks around a wounded seal, but they made no move to attack. It was as if they were curious, waiting to see what this strange little ship would do. Open a communication channel, Chun ordered. Captain, we have no idea if they can even receive, Kim started. Try anyway. The communications officer activated the ship's systems. Channel open, sir. All frequencies. Chun stepped forward. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the human vessel Defiance. We come in peace. We wish to communicate with the beings known as Void Wyarms. Silence. The Wyarms continued their slow circling. Repeat the message, Chan said. Add mathematical sequences, prime numbers, basic geometric patterns, anything that might signal intelligence. For 30 minutes, they broadcast. Prime numbers, mathematical formulas, images of human art and music, anything that might be recognized as communication from intelligent beings. The worms watched but did not respond. It's not working, Kim said quietly. The elder races were right. They can't be communicated with. Chun refused to accept that. They're intelligent enough to coordinate attacks. They're intelligent enough to choose targets. That means they can think. And if they can think, they can communicate. We just need to find the right language. What language do you speak to creatures from another dimension? Tanaka asked. It was Okonkwo who answered. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong. We're trying to send them information. But what if communication for them isn't about information? What if it's about something else? Like what? Emotion, intent. When the worms consume a world, they're taking more than matter. They're taking meaning. What if we could send them meaning directly? Chun understood immediately. The dimensional equipment. We use it to shield ourselves from their dimension. What if we could use it to send instead of receive? Tanaka's eyes went wide. That's actually possible, theoretically. We'd be projecting part of our existence into their dimensional space. It would be dangerous. If we project too much, we might lose ourselves. Do it, Chun said. The crew worked frantically to reconfigure the dimensional shielding. Outside, the worms continued their patient circling. They had all the time in the universe. They had been waiting for 12,000 years. They could wait a little longer. When the modifications were complete, Chun sat in a special chair they had rigged at the center of the bridge. Wires connected him to the dimensional projector. If this worked, his thoughts would reach across the void between universes. If it didn't, his mind might be destroyed. Ready, Captain? Tanaka asked. Activated. Pain. Incredible. Impossible. Pain, as parts of his consciousness were pulled in directions that didn't exist. Chun screamed, but he didn't let go. He pushed forward, forcing his mind through dimensions that humans were never meant to experience. And then, suddenly, contact, something vast and ancient, touched his thoughts. It was like standing at the edge of an infinite ocean, feeling the presence of something so large that his mind couldn't properly perceive it. The Worm Mother, the consciousness that guided all the others. What are you? The question came not in words, but in pure meaning. Chun felt it in his bones, in his soul. We are humans, he thought back. We come from the universe you are consuming. Your kind is small, barely real, but real enough to find you. Surprise from the Worm Mother. And had not expected that. In 12,000 years, nothing had come to it. Everything had run away. Why do you come? Chun gathered his thoughts carefully. This was the moment that would determine everything. To understand. And to help, if we can. The Worm Mother's attention sharpened. Help? You are prey. Prey does not help the hunter. We're not prey. We're people. And we know something about you that maybe you've forgotten. What could you know? Chun opened his mind, letting the Worm Mother see his thoughts. He showed it everything the humans had learned. The dying dimension on the other side of the breach. The collapse of reality that had driven the worms to seek new homes. The desperation that had turned them from whatever they once were into the consuming force they had become. You're refugees, Chun thought. Your home is dying. You're not eating our universe because you're evil. You're eating it because you're trying to survive. For a long moment, the Worm Mother was silent. Then, slowly, something changed in its presence. The overwhelming alien intelligence became something almost recognizable. Something almost sad. We were not always this way. Once we built, created, loved. Then the collapse began. Our dimension is dying. has been dying for 1 million of your years. We had nitrogen monoxide choice. Consume or be consumed. I understand, Chen thought. And he did. Humans knew what it meant to be desperate. They knew what it meant to do terrible things to survive. But we do not understand how to stop. We are hungry. Always hungry. Your universe is bright. So much energy. So much life. We cannot not consume. What if there was another option? The worm mother's attention focused even more intensely. What option? Chun shared the information that human scientists had gathered. The 17 barren dimensions they had discovered. Dead universes, empty of life, but stable. Full of energy that no one was using. Places where the worms could feed without destroying anyone. These are empty, Chun thought. No life, no minds. Nothing to hurt. We can open doors to them. You could live there, feed there, survive without causing any more death. This would work. Our scientists believe so. The worm mother's presence shifted again. There was something new there now. Something Chun almost recognized as hope. Why? Why would you do this? We have destroyed your worlds, killed your people. Why would you help you? Chun thought about the question carefully. He thought about Nexus Prime and the other systems that had been consumed. He thought about the billions of lives lost. He thought about how easy it would be to hate, because it's the right thing to do, he finally thought. Because you're not monsters. You're just people trying to survive. Like us, and humans have been refugees too. We know what it's like to be driven from home. We know what it's like to be desperate. He paused, and despite everything, a tiny part of him smiled. Also, honestly, the other species in our galaxy laughed at us. They said we were too small to matter. If we save everyone by showing compassion, instead of violence, they'll have to admit they were wrong. Humans are a little petty that way. The worm mother was silent for a long time. When it finally responded, its thoughts carried something that might have been amusement. You, as strange creatures, small and brief and strange. But perhaps that is not a bad thing. So you'll accept our offer? We will. Consider. Show you these empty dimensions. Let you see if your words are true. Chun opened his thoughts completely, sharing every piece of data the humans had gathered. Coordinates, energy readings, stability assessments. Everything. The worm mother examined the information with a mind that could process more in a second than human computers could in a year. This is acceptable. We can live in these places. We can feed without destroying. Relief flooded through Chen so strongly that he almost lost the connection. Then you'll leave? You'll stop consuming our universe? Yes, we will go to these empty places. We will trouble your reality nitrogen monoxide more. The connection began to fade. Chun felt the worm mother withdrawing back into its own dimension. But before it went completely, one last thought reached him. Human, Marcus Chen, you have given my children a future. This will not be forgotten. If your kind ever faces a darkness they cannot overcome, call to us. We will remember this debt. And then it was gone. Chun opened his eyes to find his crew staring at him. The connection had taken hours, though it had felt like minutes. His body ached. His mind felt stretched thin. Captain? Kim asked, worry clear in her voice. Did it work? Chun looked at the view screen. The void worms had stopped circling. They were moving back toward the breach, their massive forms sliding through space like shadows returning to the dark. It worked, he said. They're leaving. They're going to the empty dimensions. The bridge erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, cried, laughed with relief. They had done the impossible. They had talked to monsters and found people beneath the terror. They had saved the galaxy with words instead of weapons. Chun watched the worms disappear one by one through the breach. As the last one vanished, it seemed to pause and look back at the tiny human ship. Then it was gone. The breach began to shrink. Slowly at first, then faster. The worm mother was sealing it from the other side. Within an hour, it was completely gone. The wound in reality had healed. "Take us home," Chun said quietly. The Defiance turned and began the long journey back to human space. Behind them, the stars shone peacefully, no longer threatened by shadows from another dimension. The galaxy was saved, and it had been saved not by fleets or weapons or power, but by compassion, by the simple act of asking why instead of assuming enemy. It was the most human solution possible, and somewhere, in 17 empty dimensions, the void worms began to build new homes, new futures, new hopes, because someone had finally treated them like people instead of monsters, because one small species had been stubborn enough to try the impossible, because humans didn't know how to give up. The Defiance limped back into known space 3 weeks after the breach closed. The ship was barely holding together. The dimensional shielding had been pushed far beyond its limits. Half the systems were running on backup power. The hull was cracked in 17 places, held together by emergency patches and what the crew jokingly called aggressive optimism. But they were alive, all 3,000 of them, and they had saved the galaxy. When they crossed into human space, they found an escort waiting. Hundreds of ships from every human colony gathered to welcome their heroes home. The radio channels were filled with cheering, crying, songs and prayers and simple gratitude. Captain Chun stood on the damaged bridge, looking at the celebration outside. He felt tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. He had touched the mind of an alien god. He had carried the hopes of trillions of beings on his shoulders. Now it was over, and he wasn't sure what came next. "Captain," Commander Kim said, approaching with a communication pad. "We're receiving messages from the Galactic Concord. They want to hold an emergency session. They want us there. Specifically? You specifically. And Director Vasquez." Kim paused. "They're not laughing anymore, sir." 2 days later, Captain Chun stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Concord. The same room where Director Vasquez had been dismissed as a foolish child from a foolish species. The same room where the elder races had argued about acceptable casualties while humanity decided to actually solve the problem. The room was much fuller now. Representatives from every species in the galaxy had come to see this moment. The 5 great powers sat at their usual places, but something was different. Their postures were uncertain. Their confidence was gone. Director Vasquez stood at the central podium. She looked tired, too. The last 6 months had aged her. But she stood straight, and her voice was clear. "The void worms are gone," she announced. "The breach has been sealed. The 17 empty dimensions are now home to creatures that will never threaten our galaxy again. The crisis is over." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Relief, disbelief, wonder. Many of the delegates had truly believed they were going to die. Now they had to learn how to live with being saved. Ambassador Tethron rose to speak. His forearms were folded tightly against his body, a Valkyrie gesture of humility. "Director Vasquez." "Captain Chun, on behalf of the Valkyrie hegemony, I offer our deepest gratitude. We did not believe this was possible. We did not believe this was possible." "You made that very clear," Vasquez said. Her voice was neutral, but Chun caught the tiny hint of satisfaction beneath it. "Yes, we did." Tethran's eyes moved to meet Vasquez's gaze directly. "We were wrong. Not just about the possibility of success. We were wrong about your species. We treated you as children, as inconsequential newcomers who could contribute nothing. We laughed when you said you would handle this crisis." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was softer. "We will not laugh again." One by one, the other powers spoke. The Dramathi Grand Admiral, offered a warrior salute, and admitted that humans had shown a kind of bravery his people had never considered. The Crystalline Syndicate confessed that their prediction networks still couldn't explain how humanity had succeeded, and that perhaps there were things in the universe that couldn't be calculated. The Earth Collective simply said that they would need to revise all their models of what was possible. The Luminari Federation delegate glowed brightly as she spoke. You solved an impossible problem not with weapons or technology or power. You solved it with compassion. You treated enemies as potential friends. You asked questions when everyone else assumed answers. She dimmed slightly with what Chun recognized as shame. We have traveled the stars for thousands of years. We thought we understood everything important. Humans have shown us that wisdom is not the same as age. When all the powers had spoken, Director Vasquez stepped forward. The room fell silent. We don't want your gratitude, she said. We don't want your technology or your territory or your wealth. You offered us all those things before the Defiance even launched, trying to buy our help. We refused then, and we refuse now. Then what do you want? Tethran asked. Vasquez looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of every delegate she could. We want a seat at the table. Not at the back of the room with the other observer species. At the main table with the great powers. Protests immediately erupted from several delegations. The Dramathi representative growled that humanity had only been part of galactic society for 80 years. The Crystalline Syndicate argued that there were protocols and procedures for advancement. Even some of the smaller species complained that this was too fast, too much, too soon. Vasquez waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke again. We don't want power for ourselves. We want a voice. Because next time the galaxy faces an impossible problem, next time everyone sits in this room arguing about who to sacrifice while the universe burns, we want someone at the table who will say, wait, has anyone actually tried talking to them? She stepped back, her point made. The vote was called. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ambassador Tethran raised his hand in favor. The Luminari delegate followed. One by one, the great powers voted yes. When it was done, humanity had become the sixth great power of the galaxy, not through war, not through conquest, through compassion and determination, and the stubborn refusal to give up. Later that day, after the formal session ended, Ambassador Tethran approached Director Vasquez privately. Captain Chun stood nearby, watching the exchange. I must ask you something, Tethran said. Something that has troubled me since this began. Go ahead, Vasquez said. What would you have done if negotiation failed? If the Worm Mother had refused your offer and continued to consume the galaxy? Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. It was a warm smile, friendly and open. But there was something behind it that made Tethran uncomfortable. Something very old and very dangerous. We had contingencies, she said simply. What kind of contingencies? The kind that would have given you very good reasons to keep us on highest alert. She walked away before he could ask anything else. Chun followed, leaving the ambassador alone with his thoughts. Director, Chun said when they were out of earshot, what would we have done? If they hadn't agreed? Vasquez stopped walking and turned to face him. For a moment, her mask slipped, and Chun saw the exhaustion and fear she had been hiding for months. I don't know, she admitted. We had plans. Weapons designed to destroy rather than save. Ships that could have delivered them. If the Worms had refused, we would have tried them. She paused. But I'm glad we didn't have to find out if they would have worked. Me too. They walked in silence for a while. Around them, the celebration continued. Representatives from 100 species mingled and talked, many of them approaching humans with newfound respect. The galaxy had changed in ways that would take generations to fully understand. 6 months later, on a station far from anywhere important, a young Dramathi sat in a bar. He had recently completed his military training and was waiting for his first assignment. At a nearby table, a group of human traders were drinking and laughing too loudly, telling stories about adventures that seemed obviously exaggerated. An old Valkyrie veteran sat down next to the young Dramathi. He ordered a drink and sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the humans. First time meeting them up close? The veteran asked eventually. Yes, the Dramathi admitted. They're different than I expected. They're different than everyone expects. The veteran took a long drink. I've been traveling the galaxy for 40 years. Seen a lot of species. Thought I understood most of them. Then the humans came along and showed us all how little we really knew. What do you mean? The veteran turned to look at the young soldier. His eyes were old, filled with memories of wars and wonders and things that couldn't be explained. They're insane, he said. Absolutely and completely insane. They keep predators as pets. They eat plants that evolved to poison them and call it spicy food. They strap themselves to controlled explosions to travel between worlds. They dive into water despite not being able to breathe it. They climb mountains for fun. For fun. The young Dramathi made a sound of disbelief. That can't all be true. It's all true. I've seen it myself. The veteran shook his head. They live on a planet that's trying to kill them. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, plagues. Their sun gives them cancer. Their moon causes floods. Their atmosphere is full of a gas so reactive it can cause explosions. And they love their planet. They call it beautiful. He drained his drink and ordered another. But here's the thing. Here's what you need to understand about humans. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. When everything goes wrong. When the universe itself seems broken. When every calculation says there's no hope. They're exactly who you want standing beside you. Why? Because they don't know how to give up. They literally lack the ability. The rest of us evolved to know when to quit. Humans evolved to think, fine, I'll handle it, is a perfectly reasonable response to the end of the world. He laughed, a sound that was half admiration and half fear. Terrifying species. Wonderful friends. Just don't make them your enemy. Because they'll keep coming. They'll keep trying. They'll find a way to win that you never imagined, or they'll die in the attempt. There's no in-between with humans. No surrender. No retreat. Just forward, always forward, until the problem is solved or they are. The young Dramathi looked at the human traders again. One of them had started an arm wrestling competition with a Valkyrie twice his size. He was losing badly, but he was laughing anyway. They saved the galaxy, the young soldier said quietly. Everyone says so. They did. Not with weapons or power. With compassion and stubbornness and the crazy idea that monsters might just be people having a bad day. The veteran stood, leaving payment for his drinks. Remember that. Remember what humans can do when they decide something matters. He walked away, leaving the young Dramathi alone with his thoughts at the human table. The arm wrestling match ended with the Valkyrie winning decisively. But instead of being upset, the humans cheered and offered to buy their opponent drinks. Within minutes, they had pulled the confused Valkyrie into their group. Treating a stranger like an old friend, the young Dramathi watched them for a long time. Then he finished his drink, stood up, and walked over to introduce himself. Because if there was one thing he had learned from the stories about humanity, it was this. The impossible was just something no one had tried hard enough to do yet. And maybe, if he spent enough time around humans, some of that stubborn hope might rub off on him too. Thought the galaxy had changed. The old order was shifting. Humanity had earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through compassion. And somewhere, in 17 empty dimensions, Creatures that had once been feared as monsters were building homes, raising children, and remembering the small. Strange species that had treated them with kindness when the rest of the universe saw only enemies. The dead would be remembered. The story was just beginning. The end.